Hello there, it's Vervain. Today I have a spread in my junk journal to share with you about the books that I have read so far in 2025. And I thought that while you watch me in super speed work on putting this page together, that I would do a little voiceover talking about the 9 books that I have read so far in 2025 and what I've thought about them. So if that sounds fun and interesting to you, stick around. We've got it's mostly nonfiction with a little bit of fiction in there, some witchcraft books, some other stuff. Yeah. Anyhow, if you choose to stick around, I'll see you on the other side of the intro. Alrighty, so today I'm going to be working on this tip-in that I just added in with this beautiful fabric tape. This is from Daiso, like a long ass time ago, and I got like one in every color they had. You can see some of the blue sticking out as a tab on the right on a different page as well. And I am, like, the piece that I just showed you is the last piece that I have left of this red and pink one, which is very sad. And actually, I guess you can see another piece of that same red and pink one sticking out on the left. And then I had made this, I was making like gel prints with these beautiful bur oak leaves from my neighborhood. And this was one of the ones that I had made, and I just tipped it in. And then I saw the back of it and I was like, I kind of want to play with this. And so I started playing with it. So I'm just adding some pink and red washi tapes. And then I had already picked out, I think I had seen that letter R, because I was kind of going to clean up my letters that I had out from my last journal page that I did. And I saw that R and I thought, that R looks good with this pink page. What can I do with this? What can I spell that starts with R? And then I thought, read. I'll do a reading list page. I'll do a list of the books that I've read this year so far from my Goodreads reading challenge. And so then I did that, and then you'll see how this page progresses. So let's talk about the books I've read this year. And I don't feel like I should need to make this disclaimer, but I'll go ahead and make it, because I guess this is considered a hot take in some circles. I have mostly been reading books through audiobook form, and that is what is realistically possible for me right now with an 11-month-old baby. You can only have so many like sedentary, solitary, full attention consuming hobbies when you have a little baby, and I am just not willing for like reading to be one of those right now. Like, I enjoy reading in that I enjoy like consuming the content in books, but it's not realistic for me to be able to spend a lot of time just like sitting down with a book fully focused on it at this point in my life. When I do get to sit down and fully focus on something with both hands and my eyeballs, I like to do things like junk journal or crochet. And that's just how my life is right now. So I've been enjoying books through audiobook form, through Audible, and very much enjoying that. And that means that I can listen to my books while I garden. I can listen to my books while I cook. I can listen to my books. It depends like how much I'm playing with the baby. Like if she's actually like wants to be engaged with me, I'm going to pause the book and be engaged with her. But if she's just kind of like playing with her own toys and just wants me to sit next to her, which happens a lot of times, it's like, you leave the room, she's not happy. But if you're just like sitting less than 12 inches away from her doing your own thing, she's okay with that. So those are times when I can read, and when I'm gardening, I like to listen to audiobooks, which is great because she'll sit in her command center or in her swing outside, and she just loves being outside. I do like to limit how much time we spend doing that, because I don't like her to spend too much time like in a container, which the command center and the swing are both containers. She would love to just crawl around outside, but I would not love for her to eat all the grass and all sorts of yard plants and yard bugs and things. And, you know, that's another thing that, like, I do let her actually, like, move around and play outside sometimes when I can be fully engaged in supervising those activities. That's not something she can do while I garden yet. So, anyhow, let's see. What was the first thing that I read? For some reason, I guess the first thing that I finished was For the Children's Sake. I feel like the first thing I finished was Drawing Down the Moon. Maybe I didn't finish that first this year. It's second on my Goodreads reading challenge. I think it just feels like it was first because I started it at least last year, maybe the year before. I feel like maybe it was last year. I don't know. I'd been working on it for a long time. It's quite a long audiobook, and yeah, I'm going to talk about Drawing Down the Moon first. The full title is apparently Drawing Down the Moon, Witches, Druids, Goddess Worshippers, and Other Pagans in America. And for some reason, it's by Margot Adler. That's the one author I didn't write down, but I'm pretty sure it's by Margot Adler. And that is a book that had been on, I was basically reading this for like self-assigned homework because I've been a witch for, how old am I? I'm 32, is that right? Yeah, 32. And I did my first like spell that I knew was a spell when I was 9. So it's been about 23 years, I would say, that I have been off and on practicing witchcraft, and, you know, not quite that long that I have, like, really fully considered myself a witch and a pagan. And, you know, what do I even consider myself now? That's a question for another day. But so I have felt for a really long time, like, Drawing Down the Moon is one of those books that, like, if you're looking at, like, what books should I read as a witch to kind of get a feel for the practice. I mean, I don't know what they say now, but when I was first getting into witchcraft and Wicca, which was a phase that I went through, I do not consider myself Wiccan anymore, and I haven't for a long time. But I think I did consider myself Wiccan when I first added Drawing Down the Moon to my tangible, touchable, physical book collection and to my, like, reading list, like, I should read this. And it was not until I think last year that I actually started reading it and listening to it. I do have a hard copy, but the audiobook was just so much easier to get through for so many reasons for me. And ultimately, I feel like I probably would have gotten more out of it if I read it a long time ago. I guess I feel like there was another reviewer on Goodreads that I feel like really put it really well, and basically said that, like, this is a really good snapshot of, like, where paganism in America was when this book was written. But even though there have been, like, 2 updates to the book since then, and I was reading the updated version, it's really just very cursory updates. Is that the right word? And it does not feel, I mean, it really couldn't possibly be. It would have to be, like, twice as long to really encompass what has happened in witchcraft in the West since the book was originally written. So it does not really give you an accurate picture of what witchcraft is like in the West today. But it is an interesting historical snapshot, and there are definitely some interesting, there's at least one. There may only be one actual interview that she, like, included the whole interview in there, but I did think that was really interesting. And yeah, I think it was just really interesting to hear, like, the different opinions of the different people that she interviewed and questioned. And, you know, as someone who, like, I have found my own magical practice, mostly solitary, you know, and mostly, like, not through any sort of organized community of any kind. And so I do kind of lack a lot of context around that sort. I don't know. Anyhow, so I thought it was interesting. It definitely is not a book that I would recommend to, like, because I feel like this used to be a book that they would say, like, oh, if you're not a pagan, but like someone you love as a pagan, or you're not a witch, but someone you love as a witch, and you want to know more about witch, or like say you're a witch, but your loved ones like don't understand what that means, you should have them read Drawing Down the Moon, and that will help them understand. I would not recommend it for that reason today. Oh no, the baby wakes up. The baby is waking up. Okay, let me finish what I'm saying about Drawing Down the Moon. And then I will go check on the baby. So, yeah, actually, maybe I did finish. I think it was an interesting historical survey. I don't think it tells... I wouldn't recommend it for, like, my mom to read to understand my practice. I don't feel like my practice is at all really well represented in here. And that's that. Okay. I'll be back after I put the baby to sleep again. Okay, the baby is asleep again, so let's talk about the next book that I read, or I guess it was the first book that I finished this year. I don't know. It's called For the Children's Sake by Susan Schaeffer Macaulay, and it is one of the books that's recommended for, like, easing people into learning about Charlotte Mason, but it's so frequently recommended in Charlotte Mason discussion circles that I felt like, even though I was reading like actual Charlotte Mason, I felt like I should still read it. Again, I do feel like I don't actually know that I necessarily needed to read this, since I have kind of been soaking up the Charlotte Mason philosophy for a number of years now, and I've read the first of her 6 volumes, Home Education, I think it's called, and I'm currently reading Parents and Children. And Home Education, which I finished last year, I really, really enjoyed, and that one I would just kind of like I would read, and then I would go back and read passages, sometimes a couple pages at a time, to my husband. Charlotte Mason's writing is so beautiful. Like, it's just so musical. I think that, like, so much of what she is saying is true and useful to read. And also the way that she says it is, she just has such mastery of the English language. It's such a beautiful thing. And so Parents and Children, which is the second of her 6 volumes, I'm currently reading, but I'm reading that one aloud to my husband, and I usually read it while we're in the car. So that's going quite slowly. But we are getting through it. And like I said, my baby's only 11 months old, so I have time. And if you're not familiar, Charlotte Mason is, I'm going to say, an educational philosopher who has put forth a philosophy of education that I think does apply to, like, school education, but really especially has been taken up by homeschoolers of a certain ilk. And I have always wanted to homeschool my children. When I was in school, I remember kind of wishing that I was homeschooled, and just feeling like I was wasting so many hours of the day in school. And that's a discussion for another time. But anyhow, so For the Children's Sake, I think if I was just trying to, like, now this is one where I wouldn't recommend Drawing Down the Moon for, like, my mom to read to understand my witchcraft practice. If my mom wanted to know about my homeschooling philosophy, I would say, hey, try reading For the Children's Sake. So that's what I'll say about that one. I do remember, like, learning a couple things that I hadn't read elsewhere. Some interesting stuff about, like, Charlotte Mason herself that didn't come through in what I'd read. So that was interesting. I would recommend that if you're thinking about homeschooling, or just, like, thinking about your children's education or your children at all. and you want to know more about the Charlotte Mason method for the children's sake, is a great place to start. Okay, the next thing that I read, and I cannot believe, and you will not be able to believe this either, that I had not read this yet. Because when I got to a certain point in this book, I thought, if I was someone else meeting me for the first time now, I would look around, I as someone else would look around at my life and my home and like who I am and how I live. And I'd think, wow, The Secret Garden must have been a really formative book for you as a child. Except I never read The Secret Garden until this year. And my God, I loved it so much. There was another thing where it's so, the text, the words, the language, so beautifully written. And the story, like every time I'm like, oh my God, this story is so beautiful. I love where this is going. It would just get better. And then yes. And listening to that, I had the great pleasure of listening to it largely while I was gardening, working in my garden. And that was a beautiful thing. So I'm like already want to read it again. I already want to read it again. I'm already ready to like re-listen to The Secret Garden, but I want to read more new things also. The struggle is real. Okay. So yes, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. 11 out of 10 would read many times again. Okay. The next book that I read was New World Witchery. I guess the full title is New World Witchery, A Trove of North American Folk Magic by Cory Thomas Hutcheson. And this had been on my list for a really long time. Because I do feel like so many witchcraft resources are regionally specific and are regionally specific to like England, basically. So I thought it was really interesting to have this resource that was regionally specific to North America. That said, this might be an unpopular opinion. I felt like the author spent like an unreasonably long amount of time beating the cultural appropriation talk into the ground. I get it. I get it. But at a certain point, it doesn't feel useful anymore. It feels performative, if that's okay to say. And especially like if it was a book, I would have just been like, yep, I understand what you're saying, and skipped over it every time he brought it up. But then in the audiobook, it was just like every time he brought it up, it was like 5 whole minutes of like preaching. And like I'm not saying that you should practice cultural appropriation. I'm saying that I don't think it's as big a deal as some people want you to believe it is, specifically the people who want social credit for performatively talking about how bad it is and how they would never ever do it. Okay. I didn't even know if I was going to say that, but that was like one of the main things that bothered me about it. And then I guess the other thing that I don't know, and this is the case with so many witchcraft books, and it's why I honestly don't like read that many of them anymore, but I wanted to give it a go, I wanted to give it another go, is that I feel like I feel like the best magic is the magic you make up yourself. And that it's good to have like inspiration and information to inspire and inform. But when like a huge amount of a word count is spent on like giving examples, and I'm like just as guilty of this in the books that I wrote, because this is what the publishers say the people want. And so, you provide what the publishers say the people want, and maybe the people want this, but I don't want this. I don't necessarily want like exact recipes and instructions for spells and potions and whatever, like exactly how you would do them. I want to know like why you think this thing is good for that. And that's the thing, like I don't want a list of correspondences unless you have information about like why a particular ingredient or whatever corresponds to a particular intention. And I don't even remember if I'm guilty of that in my own book. So forgive me if I am. I'm so sorry if I am. I feel like I did a pretty good job of explaining like why. I'm thinking about like my oil book and my rune book. I feel like if you go to the individual entries for the oils and the runes, that there is pretty good explanation for like why each one is associated with each thing. But also, like when I wrote my rune book, they literally made me cut 12,000 words out of it. And like a similar sort of thing with the oil book. So if there's information that you wish was in there that wasn't in there, it's probably was in there. And then I had to cut it out, and it's probably saved in a Word document on my computer. So feel free to ask me about it. Okay, I am so far off topic. New World Witchery. Some interesting stuff. If it hadn't been an audiobook, there's no way that I would have read it cover to cover. I would have just kind of like skimmed it. And I guess that's that. There was some interesting history. There was like an unreasonably long, I don't know. There's a lot of talk about how to summon the devil. And I appreciate that is a real part of certain parts of witchcraft history. And also, I just feel like we don't need to be summoning no devil. The devil's here, and is not good. Is not good. Does not need to be here. We don't need no demons. We don't need no devils. Please make them go away. Do not be summoning no evil spirits. Okay. That's all I have to say about that. And then I read Weave the Liminal, Living Modern Traditional Witchcraft by Laura Tempest Zakroff. And this is a book that, honestly, I kind of wish that I had read this book, like 15 years ago. I feel like if I had read this book 15 years ago, I would have been like, oh, that is great to know. Because it's okay. So it kind of goes over like how you don't have to just like be one extant tradition of witch and like practice one extant tradition of witchcraft. Like it is okay to pull from different sources. It is okay to pull from different open practices. It is okay to pull from different parts of your own heritage, from your own like blood heritage and your nationality, and like the land on which you live may not share a cultural history and may not share a magical history, and it's okay to like blend those things and also follow where your heart and your intuition lead, and to kind of collage your own practice from all of that. And that is a conclusion that I and lots of other eclectic witches have very much arrived at. I very much arrived at that conclusion for myself a very long time ago. And I cannot sum up my witchcraft practice in like a nice, neat 30-word bio. Can't do it. I'm okay with that. And that's kind of the sort of thing that I feel like this book is about. And so it would have been nice to stumble across this when I was 17 and there were a couple parts of it that I was like glad to read now. Like there's a part where she says like, I don't worship the gods, I work with them. And I really do resonate with that. And there were a couple other things that I like resonated with. So did I like learn anything from it that I'm going to use in my practice? No, I don't think so. But did I feel less alone in the way that I practice? Yeah, I think it did make me feel that way. And yeah, it would have been nice to find that book a long, long time ago. Oh, well. Okay, so then I read Braiding Sweetgrass. I didn't even know until I was writing it down for this video that it has a subtitle. So the full title is Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. And that's by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And this was one that I started like a long, long time ago. I started my hard copy like on an airplane, and then I didn't finish it on that trip, and then I never picked it up again. But I've been thinking about it since then, because I was like reading about pecan trees in the very first bit of that book, and I live in Texas, and we have a lot of pecan trees around here. I have some pecan trees in my yard, which is very exciting. I have 3 pecans on my kitchen windowsill that I brought in because I was like, pecans, and then I remembered that I don't own a nutcracker, so I'm on the lookout for a cool antique nutcracker. But that's unrelated. So anyhow, like the things that she had been saying about pecans in those opening chapters and about like the fruiting cycle of the pecan trees really stuck with me through all those years between when I started the book and when I picked it back up again. And I kept thinking about it, and I just kept thinking, I really want to get back to that book. I really want to get back to that book. So I got the audiobook, and I listened to it mostly while I gardened. While I breastfed, while I cooked, while I cleaned, all those sorts of things. And this book was so good and so enchanting. And once again, this is a writer who writes so beautifully. She has such a mastery of words and of the English language. It's prose, but it feels like poetry. Charlotte Mason is similar. And I love reading good writing. And I think I can also I think probably also I had more grace for Weave the Liminal than I did for New World Witchery, because Weave the Liminal also had really beautiful writing. So even if I didn't feel like I was learning a whole lot, I just really appreciated the way that Laura Tempest Zakroff put things. And especially because she was using so many weaving metaphors while I was getting back into yarn arts and weaving specifically. And then, I don't know, New World Witchery was just kind of like, some guy wrote this, was how I felt. And I feel kind of bad for saying that, but I don't know, that's how I felt. Nothing about it enchanted me. But Braiding Sweetgrass enchanted me from start to finish, and I'm still thinking about some of the natural science things that I learned reading that book. There's so much to think about. And I finished that book, and then I immediately went to see is this on any I went to check if it was on the Ambleside Online book list, and Ambleside Online I could have a whole chat about because it's a free Charlotte Mason curriculum, which makes it very tempting. I also recently found out it's a Young Earth curriculum, and if you are listening and you actually know anything about Charlotte Mason and you know anything about me, you might be like, why is this woman so into Charlotte Mason? Because Charlotte Mason very much believed that the Bible should be part of school. The Bible should be part of life, from very early on. Was a very important part of education. And thought that basically that religion and spirituality could not be separated from education. And I think that actually, in a lot of ways, I think she's right. And I certainly don't have a problem with, I could certainly stand to study the Bible more. I I am not one of those witches who like came to witchcraft as a rebellion against my Christian upbringing. I was kind of brought up in the religion of science. Like, my parents are both nominally Christian, but I was really much more brought up in the religion of science and academia than in any official religion. And so, like, my parents were, like, surprised when I turned out to be a witch, and for some reason disappointed, but I was like, you literally didn't raise me with any religion. How can you be upset that I found my own? Anyhow, so I do feel like I would benefit from studying the Bible more, just like from an educational perspective. And I certainly don't have a problem with doing that with my children, and especially would love to do it, with my children, where we can all discuss it as a family. And also, I think I've discussed this before, maybe on this channel or in some podcast interview or something, that like, I think witchcraft gets a bad rap among Christians and Christianity gets a bad rap among witches. But I think that we have a lot to learn from each other. And I think that, frankly, most modern witches have a much more Christian philosophy than they realize or are willing to admit. And, okay, that's where I will leave that for now, because this is supposed to be a book discussion. And so like that far I'm willing to go with Charlotte Mason, but then I found out that Ambleside Online is a Young Earth curriculum. And so now I'm like, okay, well, I still kind of want to like mostly use what they have, because they've done a really good job of picking out books by a lot of other metrics and like setting up a schedule for it. But I'd like to switch out some of the books for other things probably. And all this to say that I enjoyed Braiding Sweetgrass so much that as soon as I finished it, I was like, where can I put this in the curriculum, in my child's homeschool curriculum? Like, what year would this be appropriate? Surely this has to be included in the natural history textbooks. And there was somebody else in the Ambleside Online Facebook group who wanted to do that. But then the Facebook group, for some reason, is like, all discussions about book substitutions must take place in the forum. We're closing down the comments on this Facebook post. So I don't know, whatever. That's another thing for another day. Okay, what else did I read? Anyhow, Braiding Sweetgrass, 10 out of 10, highly recommend. I learned so much about science, and I learned so much about American Indigenous history, and also it was just so beautiful to read and listen to. That's another one that like The Secret Garden and Braiding Sweetgrass are the highlights of this list so far. And then I guess the next one was also kind of a highlight, and that was The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. And this is one that probably I should have read this in middle school, but for some reason it missed me. I missed it. It missed me. I didn't read it. And I came upon this because I was wanting to read, a fairy tale fantasy, and I'm finding myself frustrated with the fact that fantasy and romantasy are increasingly hard to, it's increasingly hard, it seems, to find a good fantasy book or series that is not romantasy. And I don't mind a little bit of romance in my fantasy, but it seems like a lot of these books that are coming out these days are not a little bit of romance in your fantasy. It's a little bit of fantasy in your romance. And frankly, they're romances that I cannot get behind. They're not good examples of positive relationships and romance. And that's not sexy to me. Abuse is not sexy to me. Sorry. And I'm not here to kink shame, but actually abusive people are not sexy, and that seems to be what a lot of these stories are about. Anyhow, okay. So I don't want to read that shit. No offense if you do. Like, I support you reading whatever the fuck you want to read. But I don't want to read that shit. I want to read fairy tales that are beautifully written and have beautiful poetic undercurrents and stories in them. And The Goose Girl actually is one of those. It's really beautifully written. It has all of these like little mini stories like woven in as kind of like a part of the fabric of the story, and they're so poetic and so lovely. And the parts of The Goose Girl that are predictable are only predictable because they're a fairy tale, because it's a fairy tale, and like I can kind of get behind it, you know? I can forgive it because it's a fairy tale and because it's beautifully written, and also because like the two main parts of it that I found predictable, that I won't spoil in case you haven't read it and in case you don't find it predictable, were like you still didn't know exactly like how it was going to happen or like what the consequences of it were going to be. And one of them was like part of like a romance thing, which again, like I'm totally cool with romance woven into my fairy tale. I love a little romance woven into my fairy tale. I think what is a great fairy tale without a little bit of romance? And so, you know, much in the way that like you want, you know, you want the romantic element to be a little predictable, right? Like you want to be sitting on the edge of your seat, like waiting for the thing to happen. And then it happens and it's so satisfying. Okay. So The Goose Girl, I just so thoroughly enjoyed. And I enjoyed it so thoroughly that I let my enjoyment of The Goose Girl carry me through the next 2 out of 3 books in that series by that author. So The Goose Girl is book 1 of the books of Bayern. And then after that, there is Enna Burning, River Secrets, and Forestborn. And I read Enna Burning, and it was fine. We had some more like abusive romance show up in there for some reason. I mean, it was Stockholm Syndrome. Like, I don't know. It was one of those where like you can kind of forgive it for the sake of the story, but also it was kind of one note and kind of dark, and it just was not, it was not enchanting in the same way that The Goose Girl was. It lacked the charm that The Goose Girl had. And also was kind of irritating. And then River Secrets, the third one, really, really tested my patience, because I felt like it was actually very condescending to me as a reader. There were a number of, well, like the main character is just like not self-aware at all. Like not even a little, like it lacks self-awareness in ways that make no sense. There's lacking self-awareness, and then there's like this guy. So there was that, but then also the whole premise of this book is that they're like trying to negotiate their way out of a war, which, like, by the way, they just won this war against these other people in book 2. And now in book 3, it's like these other people still want to go back to war with them, even though they lost, and they're trying to go like negotiate and keep that from happening. So 1, it seems unrealistic to me that a nation that lost a war as badly as they did in book 2 would be like itching to go back to war in book 3. 2, like the reason that they give for like this country going to war in the first place is ridiculous, and I don't believe it. Like it's not economical. It's literally just like, I don't know. It's ridiculous. I don't buy it. And then the whole reason that they give for the people wanting to go back to war is like they literally say that like the nobles don't want to go to war, but the nobles are like trying to, you know, listen to the needs and the desires of the people, and the people really want to go back to war. Which, when has that ever happened? When have the elite classes ever been like, oh, it would be better if we didn't go to war, but you know, our citizens really want to go get fucked, so I guess we should vote to go back to war so that they can all go get killed in battle against the fire witches and stuff. Okay, so, and literally they're like, oh, our soldiers are upset that the last war ended so quickly and they feel like they missed their chance to go to battle. Like, in what world? I don't believe any of that shit. And, okay, so, like, here's a little spoiler. So skip this if you want to read these books. But a little spoiler is that kind of book 1, the Goose Girl hinges on the Goose Girl, our main character, becoming, like, a wind speaker. And then book 2 hinges on our main character, Enna, becoming a fire speaker. And so book 3, it's called River Secrets. You kind of know from the beginning that you're going to have a water speaker featuring heavily in this book. And it's very clear from a scene rather early in the book. Like, the author drops enough hints to make it very clear who the water speaker is. And then doesn't admit it. Like, the author doesn't admit it to the reader, and the main character doesn't pick up on it. And then when it's revealed, like, towards the end of the book, it's dropped like it's this big surprise, big reveal. Like, oh my God, you didn't know, but she was a water speaker the whole time. And it's like, no, we fucking knew. You told us like 8 chapters ago. So we knew. Anyhow, there was a good twist, like a good reveal in that book. It wasn't all bad. But when I was trying to decide whether... Well, apparently voiceovers in this app max out at 30 minutes, so it cut me off. But what I was saying is that I was trying to decide whether or not to read Forestborn, the 4th book in the series, and I read a bunch of Goodreads reviews, and, you know, some of them were like, oh my God, this was so good, but a lot of them were like, I don't know, you can go read them, pretty scathing. And there was one that I came across from somebody who I could tell was a kindred spirit with me. They were like, the Goose Girl was so good, and I just keep reading these damn books, wanting another one to be that good, and Shannon Hale should have not let these go to the publisher like they did, because they suck. And anyhow, so I didn't read Forestborn. I just didn't read it, and I guess here we are at the end of my video. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more videos like this, and I will see you around in the next one. Bye. And I put the art in a troubled heart.